Welcome to the Folktale Project. This is Dan Scholes. Today we have another English folktale, and one that is meant to dissuade young rebellious children, from not listening to their mothers, by presenting, the most boogiest man of all boogeymen I've ever heard of. This is Mr. Miacca. Tommy Grimes was sometimes a good boy and sometimes a bad boy, and when he was a bad boy, he was a very bad boy. Now his mother used to say to him, "Tommy, Tommy, be a good boy, and don't go out of the street, or else Mr. Miacca will take you." But still, when he was a bad boy, he would go out of the street, and one day, sure enough, he had scarcely got around the corner, when Mr. Miacca did catch him, and popped him into a bag upside down, and took him off to his house. When Mr. Miacca got Tommy inside, he pulled him out of the bag and set him down, and felt his arms and legs. "You're rather tough," says he, "but you're all I've got for supper, and you'll not taste bad boiled. But body of me, I forgot the herbs, and it's bitter you'll taste without herbs. Sally! I say Sally!" And he called Mrs. Miacca. So Mrs. Miacca came out of another room and said, "What do you want, my dear?" "Oh, here's a little boy for supper," said Mr. Miacca. "And I forgot the herbs. Mind him, will ye, while I go for them?" "All right, my love," says Mrs. Miacca, and off he goes. Then Tommy Grimes said to Mrs. Miacca, "Does Mr. Miacca always have little boys for supper?" "Mostly, my dear," said Mrs. Miacca, "if little boys are bad enough and get in his way." "And don't you have anything else but boy meat? No pudding?" asked Tommy. "Ah, I loves pudding," says Mrs. Miacca. "But it's not often the likes of me gets pudding." "Why, my mother is making a pudding this very day," said Tommy Grimes, "and I'm sure she'd give you some if I ask her. Shall I run and get some?" "Now that's a thoughtful boy," said Mrs. Miacca. "Only don't be long, and be sure to be back for supper." So, off Tommy pelters, and right glad he was to get off so cheap. And for many a long day he was as good could be, and never went round the corner of the street. But he couldn't always be good. And one day he went round the corner, and as luck would have it, he hadn't scarcely got round it when Mr. Miacca grabbed him up, popped him in his bag, and took him home. When he got him there, Mr. Miacca dropped him out, and when he saw him, he said, "Ah, you're the youngster that served me and my missus that shabby trick, leaving us without any supper. Well, you shan't do it again. I'll watch over you myself. Here, get under the sofa, and I'll sit on it and watch the pot boil for you." So poor Tommy Grimes had to creep under the sofa, and Mr. Miacca sat on it and waited for the pot to boil. As they waited, and they waited, and they waited, and they waited, but still the pot didn't boil, till, at last, Mr. Miacca got tired of waiting and said, "Here, you under there. I'm not going to wait any longer. Put out your leg and I'll stop your giving us the slip." So Tommy put out a leg, and Mr. Miacca got a chopper and chopped it off and pops it in the pot. Suddenly, he calls out, "Sally! My dear, Sally!" And nobody answered. So he went into the next room to look out for Mrs. Miacca, and while he was there, Tommy crept out from under the sofa and ran out the door, for it was the leg of the sofa that he had put out. So Tommy Grimes ran home and never went round the corner again, till he was old enough to go alone. And that is the English folktale of Mr. Miacca. We all have those moments with our parents, don't we? where they turn around and tell us about some boogeyman that will take us if we don't pay attention, don't listen, don't stay out of the street. And I would be lying if I said I hadn't used that same tactic myself. This is Dan Scholes for the Folktale Project. Don't forget that you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, Overcast, anywhere you like to get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Folktale Project. You can find us on Auto Radio, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, anywhere you like to listen. And you can always head over to folktaleproject.com, where you'll find a new story waiting for you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. As always, thank you so much for listening.